The reason hunting parties still went into the woods was mainly for lumber. Since the land wasn't safe for lizardmen, cutting trees was a job for technical experts. These rangers were allowed a degree of autonomy in the field, but they were still under the chief's command. They were expected to follow his orders. In this way, Lizardman society was a patriarchy with strict role division, but there were some exceptions, beings completely outside the chief's command. These were travelers. The word traveler might bring to mind outsiders, but visiting foreigners were unheard of. Lizardman society was generally isolationist. Accepting anyone from outside the tribe was rare. So who were these travelers? They were lizardmen who wished to see the world. Barring some kind of emergency, such as being unable to obtain food, these creatures would virtually never leave their birthplace. But a few rare exceptions longed to see the outside world. When travelers decided to leave their tribe, they were branded with a special mark on their chests. It signified that they were no longer under the tribe and its authority. Most of those who set out into the world never came back. Perhaps they perished wherever they ended up, or they found a new life for themselves. Their fates were never certain, but sure enough, every so often, they concluded their journeys and went home. Returning travelers were valuable for the knowledge they brought back with them. They were outsiders when it came to the tribal hierarchy, but they gained respect in a different way. Truth be told, there were those in the village who disliked Zayusu, but in general he was well regarded, not just because he was a traveler, but because he stepped off the last stair into the marsh. The trusty weapon slung at his waist clinked against his scales. The pale blade glowed faintly. It had a strange shape. Where the blade and grip united, it looked like a three-pronged club. But past the handle, the blade tapered to points only about as thick as a piece of parchment. There was not a lizardman alive who didn't know this weapon. All the members of every tribe recognized the magic items known as the four great treasures. Zayusu's sword was the one named Frostpain. That famous weapon was the reason for Zayusu's renown. He set off at a casual pace. He had two destinations. He made sure to take a gift to leave at one of them. His presents were 4 huge fish, each over 3 feet long. These were the staple food for his people. He carried them on his back. The fishy smell didn't bother Zayusu. In fact, it made him extremely hungry. I want to just eat them, he thought. He snorted a couple of times to clear his mind and splish-splashed his way into the Green Claw village. Some children with still vibrant green scales ran past him, laughing sha-sha, but they stopped when they noticed his cargo. The growing children peeping out from the shade of their dwellings also focused on him, on the fish. Their mouths were slightly open, probably filled with drool. Even after he had moved on, their gazes followed him. The children wanted a snack. He cracked a smile and walked on, pretending not to notice them. He'd already decided who these fish were for. Unfortunately for those kids, it wasn't them. Zayusu was happy that the glint in their eyes wasn't hunger, though. A few years ago, that would have been impossible. With those yearning eyes on his back, he passed the houses standing here and there. The hut he was aiming for came into view. This was the edge of the village. A little farther ahead, the marsh began to deepen into more of a lake. The hut on this subtle boundary line was sturdier than it looked. It was bigger than Zayusu's house. If there was anything strange about it, it was definitely the structure's slight tilt. Half the house was underwater, but this wasn't due to decay. It had been intentionally built that way. Zayusu approached the hut, making loud sploosh-sploosh noises in the water. When he got closer, he heard an affection-seeking cry from inside. Perhaps the smell of the fish had wafted over. A snake-like head poked out of one of the building's openings. Once the dark brown scaled, amber-eyed head confirmed it was Zayusu, it stretched its neck out to wrap itself affectionately around him. There. Zayusu pet the snake with a practiced hand. The snake smiled at the sensation, narrowing its eyes. It had eyelids besides the protective coating over its eyeballs. The snake's scales felt nice against Zayusu's hand, too. This creature was Zayusu's pet. His name was Rororo. Since Zayusu had been taking care of Rororo for most of the pet's life, he felt they could even have conversations. Rororo, I brought you some food. Eat up, okay? He tossed the fish he brought through the window. A noise like a splash or maybe a splat sounded from inside. I'd like to stay and play, but I have to go check on the fish. See you later. As if he could understand what was being said, the snake rubbed against Zayusu a couple of times, reluctant to let him go, and then withdrew into the hut. After that came the sound of clutching and chewing. Zayusu figured from Rororo's enthusiasm that he was in good shape, so Zayusu left the hut. His next objective was also a bit removed from the village. It was at the lakeshore. He pattered quietly through the forest, making quiet plek-plek sounds. Traveling by water would have been faster, but it had become a habit of his during his walks to see if there were any problems on land. Still, the low visibility thanks to the trees was a strain on even Zayusu's mind. Eventually, though his destination was visible through a gap in the woods, he sighed with relief that nothing had happened. Then, slipping through the trees, he closed the rest of the distance with quick steps. After ducking under the last of the jutting branches, Zayusu widened his eyes in surprise. He never imagined he would see that familiar figure here. It was a lizardman with black scales like his own. "Brother O, it's you." The black-scaled lizardman turned around and focused his eyes on Zayusu to greet him. This was the chief of the Green Claw tribe and Zayusu's elder brother, Shasryu Shasha. He had been victorious in 2 contests to decide who would be chief. He maintained rule for the current term without needing to fight. The most distinct feature of this lizardman was his physique. Next to him, Zayusu with his average build looked small. Old scars ran white across Shasryu's black scales. They looked like lightning bolts tearing through a dark cloud. He carried a huge sword on his back. It was a thick, rugged thing about 6.5 feet long. The steel sword, proof that he was chief, was enchanted with magic. This prevented rust and made it sharper. Zayusu stood next to his brother on the lakeshore. "What are you doing in a place like this?" "I could ask you the same thing, brother. The chief doesn't need to bother coming all the way out here." MPH. At a loss for words, Shasryu answered with his characteristic grunt and looked out toward the lake. Sturdy poles jutted out of the water to surround the area. Extremely fine nets were strung between the poles. The setup was immediately recognizable, a fish preserve. "You didn't come to sneak a bite, did you?" Shasryu's tail jumped and slapped the ground a couple of times. MPH. "I wouldn't do that. I just came to see how the breeding is going." "Zayusu, do you really think of me that way?" he said with force and loomed a step closer. The pressure he gave off was like a wall closing in. Even the traveler and veteran fighter Zayusu felt the need to back up a couple of steps. But he had the perfect comeback. "So if you only came to look in on the breeding, then I guess you don't want any, huh? That's too bad, brother. If they were growing well, I was going to give you some." MPH. The slapping noise stopped and Shasryu's tail drooped. "They were real tasty, nice and fat because they've been getting proper nutrition. They have more fat on them than the normal fish you can catch. Oh, when you bite into them, that quality fat just oozes out. And when you tear a piece off, it melts in your mouth." MPH. The slapping started up again. It was more intense than before. Zayusu eyed his brother's excited appendage. He said half teasingly, "Your wife says your heart's in your tail. What? How dare she mock her husband? Besides, what does she mean by that anyway?" he answered, looking over his shoulder at his now motionless tail. Zayusu wasn't sure how to respond. He simply said, sheesh. "Yes," so he continued, "if you got hitched, you'd know how I feel. Oh, I can get married." "Huh, nonsense. You mean because of that mark? It doesn't matter what the elders say, you can just ignore them. Plus, I don't think there's a single female in the village who would hate getting propositioned by you. They'll take anyone with a good tail." Lizardmen stored nutrition in their tails, so larger tails were appealing to the opposite sex. In the past, Zayusu might have preferred thick-tailed females, but as a male who had grown up and seen the world, he'd rather avoid them now if he could. "I am not that into the fat-tailed females in the village now. Came to it, I'd choose a skinnier one. Personally, your wife's size is fine with me. That may be given your personality, but stay away from the taken ones. I am not participating in any pointless bloodshed. But you should know the pain of marriage. It's not fair if I am the only one." Whoa, I am gonna tell your wife." MPH. "There you go, this is one of the pains of being married. I am the chief of the tribe and your elder brother, but you can blackmail me so easily." The happy laughter echoed out over the lake for a few moments. When it stopped, Shasryu observed the fish preserve with some emotion. "This is really something, though. When he couldn't find the words, Zayusu gave him a hand. "Preserve? Yeah, that. No one has ever done something like this in our tribe before, and news of your success has already spread far and wide. At this rate, all the people watching, envious of your fish, will start to imitate you. It's thanks to you, brother. I know you talked to everyone about it." "Zayusu, all I did was relay the truth. I just chatted with them. What is significant is that you worked hard and raised these delicious-looking fish here. At first, the project met failure after failure. Of course it had. He just heard explanations on his travels and tried to build it based on those. Even building the fence was a string of failures. After a year of trial and error, the preserve was built, but that wasn't the end. He had to take care of the fish. He had to feed them. How many times had the fish died on him as he threw in different foods to test what would be best? There were times monsters ripped through the enclosure nets and made all his hard work for nothing. He was criticized for playing with fish caught as food. People had even called him stupid. But now the fruits of his labor were plain to see. The shadow of a big fish swimming by floated below the surface of the lake. It was fairly big, even for the fish caught in the area. No one would believe he raised it from a fry, except for his brother and sister-in-law. It's really something, Chasryu murmured again as they stood watching the scene together. His words were filled with emotion. Zayusu's words were just as heartfelt. It's part thanks to you, brother, MPH. What did I even do? Sure, Chasryu hadn't done anything, but only in the most technical sense. When the fish weren't doing well, a priest would suddenly appear. When it was time to gather fence-making materials, there were helping hands. When the catch of the day was distributed, healthy live fish came his way. There were also hunters who brought fruit as fish food. It was never revealed who had asked for these people to help him, but even a total fool could tell who was behind it, and that he didn't feel like being named. It wouldn't look good for the chief to support a traveler who had deviated from the tribe's caste system. Brother, when they get bigger, I'll bring some to you first. Heh. I'll be looking forward to it. Chasryu spun on his heel and began walking away. Then he murmured, sorry, what are you talking about, brother? You didn't do anything wrong. Did he hear him or not? Zayusu watched as Chasryu headed into the distance along the edge of the lake without a word. After confirming everything was all right at the fish preserve, Zayusu had returned to the village. He suddenly felt something strange and looked at the sky. It was a normal sky, an endless stretch of blue. The mountains broke through a wisp of cloud to the north. It was the usual scenery. Nothing seemed different. Just as he figured his mind was playing tricks on him, he noticed a strange cloud. Everyone in the center of the village noticed it at the same time, a solitary dark mass blocking the sun. It was thick and heavy, like a rain cloud. The priest had said today would be clear all day. Their weather forecasts were magical, and thanks to their knowledge from long years of experience, extremely accurate. Everyone was surprised they'd gotten it wrong, but the odd thing was that aside from a single dark cloud over the village, there were no other rain clouds. It was as if someone had summoned a cloud to hang directly over the village. Then things got stranger. Swirling around the center of the village, the mysterious cloud started to spread out. It encroached on the blue sky with tremendous speed. This was abnormal. The warrior caste hurriedly went on guard. Children practically dove into their houses. Zayusu lowered his center of gravity and reached for frost pane as he scanned the area. The darkness blocked out almost the entire sky now. It was possible to see some blue far in the distance, so the cloud was truly hanging over the village. In the midst of this, the center of the settlement was in turmoil. The wind from that direction carried shrill, abrasive cries. These cries made full use of the Lizardmen vocal cords. The din was a warning. It meant there was a dangerous threat nearby. Perhaps evacuation was necessary. When Zayusu heard it, he raced through the marsh faster than most Lizardmen could manage. He ran and ran and ran. It wasn't easy to move in the marsh, but he kept his balance by twisting his tail. At a speed impossible for a human, although Lizardmen had feet geared for places like this, Zayusu arrived at the source of the alarm. There he found Chasryu and the warriors in a circle. They were focused on the center of the village. Zayusu followed their line of sight and glared at the object of their attention. At the place where their many gazes crossed was a monster like wavering black fog. Inside the fog, a multitude of horrifying faces formed and dissipated a moment later. The variety of creatures and peoples had one thing in common. All their expressions spoke of eternal pain. Anguished sobs, resentful voices, tortured screams, and dying gasps formed a chorus that rode on the wind. A spine-freezing hatred pressed in on them. The horror of it caused Zayusu to shiver. This is bad. Brother and I should let the others go and take care of it ourselves. But this was a powerful undead. It could frighten even Zayusu, considered a top-class warrior among the other tribes dotting the area. Zayusu and his brother were probably the only ones who could put up a fight. What's more, Zayusu knew the monster's special ability. He glanced around and noted that although there were only warrior caste lizardmen present, almost all of them were breathing hard like frightened children. The monster didn't budge from its position in the center of the village. How much time passed that way? The tension was so thick, even the slightest trigger would cause an explosion. It was evident from the way the warriors slowly huddled closer together. In order to even move, they had to desperately struggle against the mental pressure. Noticing Shasaryu draw his weapon, Zayusu followed suit and silently assumed a fighting stance. If there was going to be a fight, he meant to charge faster than anyone. They shouldn't consider it overstepping my bounds if I let everyone know what this thing's special ability is. The air was stagnant with accumulated tension. It thickened even further, and suddenly the resentful clamor stopped. The voices from the monster mixed together to form one. Unlike the incomprehensible curses, this voice conveyed a proper meaning. Listen, servants of the Great One, I come as a forewarning. Everyone stirred and looked at one another. Only Zayusu and Shasaryu kept their eyes fixed. I announce your deaths. The Great One has mobilized an army that shall destroy you. Though he is generous, he will grant you time to put up a frantic, futile resistance. 8 days from today. On that day, you will be the second of the Lizardmen tribes around this lake to be sacrificed. Zayusu's face twitched into a scowl. He bared his teeth to growl threateningly. Put up a desperate resistance so that the Great One may delight in ridiculing you. Like smoke and its constantly shifting shape, the monster distorted and warped as it floated up into the air. Don't forget 8 days, and it flew through the sky undisturbed in the direction of the forest. Among the many lizardmen watching it as it went, Zayusu and Shasaryu gazed silently at the far horizon. The largest hut in the village served as a meeting place. Usually it wasn't used much. The lizardmen had a tribal chief with absolute authority. They didn't hold meetings very often, so there was almost no point in having the hut at all. But that day, there was unusual excitement in the air. So many lizardmen were inside that what should have been a spacious room felt small. The warrior caste was there, of course, but so were the priests, hunters, and elders. The traveler Zayusu was also there. Everyone was seated cross-legged facing Shasaryu. Shasaryu, the chief, announced the beginning of the meeting. The head of the priests spoke first. She was an older female lizardman with strange symbols written on her body with white dye. The designs all had meanings, but Zayusu didn't know them. Do you remember the cloud that covered the sky? That was magic. As far as I know, there are only 2 spells that can manipulate weather. One is a tier 6 spell called Control Weather. It couldn't be that one. Casters who can use tier 6 spells are the stuff of legends. The other is the tier 4 Control Cloud. Again, only an immensely powerful caster could use this. Only a fool would bare their fangs at such an enemy. The similarly painted priests lined up behind the head priest and nodded in agreement. Zayusu knew what a feat tier 4 magic was, but the doubtful groans of many who didn't echoed throughout the room. The look on the head priestess' face showed she wasn't sure how to best explain it, so she singled out a lizardman. He looked perplexed and pointed questioningly at himself. Yes, you. Could you win in a fight against me? The lizardman hurriedly shook his head. He would probably be confident he could beat her if they were fighting using only weapons. But he had a very slim chance if magic was allowed. A slim chance existed, but as a warrior, it was practically not worth considering. But I can only use up to tier 2, so our enemy is twice as strong, someone asked. Sighing at the question, the head priest shook her head in lament. It's not that simple. Someone using tier 4 magic could probably kill even our chief with no trouble at all. Finally, she said, I can say for sure. The possibility exists, and closed her mouth. Once everyone understood the awesome power of tier 4 magic, a silence descended on the room. Then Shasaryu's voice sounded again. In other words, head priest, I think we should run away. Even if we fight, we can win. What are you saying? Roared a large lizardman in a deep voice as he leaped up. In terms of sheer brawn, he, the leader of the warriors, was probably on par with Shasaryu. You mean we should run before we even try to fight? Because of that little threat? Do you have any brains in your head? If we ray fighting, it's already too late. The head priest stood to meet the head warrior's stare. Emotions were running high. They unconsciously made threatening sounds at each other. As the words touch-and-go situation came to everyone's minds, a cold voice rang out. That's enough. The warrior and priest turned to look at Shasryu as if he'd woken them up with a bucket of cold water. Then they both apologized and sat back down. Headhunter, what's your opinion? I can understand the head warrior's view, as well as the head priest's. They both make sense. A lanky lizardman spoke in answer to Shasryu's question. Though he was lean, he wasn't lacking muscle, he was just extremely slim. So I think since we have time, we can see how things go. It said there LL be an army. They LL need to pitch camp and whatnot. Isn't it fine to observe them and decide what to do after that? Several voices agreed that it didn't make sense to say this or that now when they lacked information. Elder, I can say anything.